What is the importance? Because I know you do a lot of this sort of thing in tours, but being
Yeah.
able to introduce people, in this case specialists, to an archaeological site like this that they've never seen before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what strikes me about all of this being here for the very first time is just the layers of material and history. The Mississippian material, even though it's maybe not visually as imposing, the way, Kevin, you talked about it, just sort of being underneath everything else. And you pointed out exactly where to look for all of those elements. I thought was just fabulous. I got a really good sense of this being a place that's kind of growing vertically on top of that really ancient substrate. I got a really good sense of the place.
Yeah.
The idea that so much is happening in one particular spot, you know, this is a place where people have wanted to live as far back as you can think.
Yeah.
Just one spot.
Why did you choose here after COVID, bringing everybody back? It's an area familiar to you, but what did you hope that they'd get out of it?
Well, it's a it's a place that many of them have known about. Some of them their whole lives, decades, and never had an opportunity to visit here. The mounds really give you kind of, even though we might talk about them as not being as visually impressive as they were 1,000 years ago, they give you something on the landscape that you can focus your interpretations on. And that's the real value there, that kind of site. But we haven't done a field trip in a long time.
But how else should one do it to open that world to people, to describe it, the connection to the past and the importance of that?
Takes a change in scholarship, for one thing, that has started. In Mesoamerica, we don't really see that strong disjuncture between the 1500s and what happened before and today, because people acknowledge that as part of their heritage. But in the United States, which is much more of a conquest, Western European conquest situation, where that sense of continuity with the people that were already here did not exist. It doesn't exist today. We still don't acknowledge that that's part of our history, not their history, and our history starts in 1492. So historicizing the Mississippian period is one of the things that I've been trying to do for a long time, which is, tear down that barrier between 1492 and what happened before. Because people were still here until 1475. And that's a generation gap, not a Berlin Wall that should stand between the people that were here in 1475 and the people that we began to acknowledge in 1500. Or, the 1600s.
Yeah.
We're talking about Tennessee in particular. And this place and a few other places like it, there aren't a lot, are well preserved enough, and they're focal points on the landscape that allow you to kind of tell that history and as if it were one history, not I'm going to go to Old Town to see some old mounds. What I advertised this as was a field trip where we're going to see the important things that are preserved here, which is the mound site's one of them, the house is another, the bridge is another, and it brings together everything. And it's the trace, the roads, and the other thing I talk about all the time is the mineral springs, which are really focal points on the landscape.
I'm not specializing in this part of the world, but I do teach this area in one class, which is a survey of ancient art.
Yeah.
And I'm the only, it's a rotating class, some faculty does it, I do it one year. I'm the only person who brings in anything on ancient North America at all.
Yeah.
And so, I spent about 2 weeks going from Poverty Point up to, through woodland, up through Mississippian material. And I always ask the students, and there may be 200, 300 students in the room, who has ever heard of this stuff before?
Yeah.
And I remember one year, nobody raised their hand.
Yeah.
Nobody had no idea. I mean, you know this from teaching, but it's extraordinary to me that no one knows Spiro or, Moundville or and it's not surprising, but it also shocks me.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to put it otherwise.
And-
And we need to fix that
Yeah.
somehow. We need to make that.
And the fixing of it or addressing it. Part of it is
Yeah.
like today.
Yeah.
Part of it is what we hope to do, and we have been doing, but hope to do is introduce
Yeah.
younger people
Yeah.
in schools.
Yeah.
And eventually, I guess, the equivalent of textbooks get changed. But
Yeah, that's a hard slog, but there's got to be some, attacking it on a lot of different fronts through popular media, and I think we archaeologists do a terrible job of public engagement in general. There are a lot of exceptions to that, but we just have to keep doing a lot more of it.
are we making progress, or are we moving in the right direction, or you feel good about where we're going, or do you see certain accelerants that we need and can all play a part in finding?
The biggest challenge is the development boom that continues, that started in the 1980s here and has only slowed down a little bit a couple of times, and now it's skyrocketing
Yeah,
again
yeah,
in the last few months. Just preserving the sites is a challenge right now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the first time in, 15 years that the state has actually purchased a piece of property for archaeological, largely for archaeological preservation.
Yeah.
We had a couple, a few decades ago when Pram Park was created by the city of Brentwood,
Right.
where the Fuchs site is located, big mountain site. The connection between the conservancies, many conservancies that are out there right now, and recognizing the significance of archaeological sites.
Yeah.
That's something that we need to fix.
Yeah.
For this recent acquisition, 532 acres we bought, that was done by a consortium of 3, including, I think, the Nature Conservancy was part of that.
Right.
And so they bought it and held it until the state
Yeah.
could go through the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. For somebody coming out who knows nothing about archaeology and nothing about history and doesn't really care about it, what I have found over the last 8 years is that coming to a place that has feeling to it, that isn't just the mound, it isn't just that period of history, which we, in particular want to celebrate, but when they come here with the feeling of openness, of restoration, of acceptance, of all sounds, like, are you sure? Are you just saying this? But literally people will drive down the road and drive in the driveway and spend 15 minutes here and they'll say, there's some feeling to it. And I don't know where it really comes from overall, but somewhere, whether it's our own identity or our own meaning in life or I'm part of something much greater than myself, I'm part of this sense of history. There were 1,000 people who lived here before like me and had family and played on this ground that I knew nothing about. But I can't really articulate it, and that's sort of what I'm sensing. But how do you describe that to a typical person, this sense of identity that comes from archaeology, architecture, rootedness, sense of time and place? But how do you even describe it?
There's some sites that I think succeed in wowing people, who don't know anything, that engage them, that kind of force the issue on them, that they want to kind of figure out what they're seeing, what they're looking at.
These are pyramids. They're substructures
sure.
for important buildings, temples, and social houses. And they used to say Indian pots. What pops into their head is not very impressive.
Yeah.
And people don't know what the artwork of the best Mississippian artisans was.
Thank you both for being here. It's important to me, it's important to Tracy, but really more important to the people of Old Town, both people here today, but more important to the people of the future. And your words, your presence, your presentation, your being able to bring people into the sense of time and place is really appreciated. But thanks so much for being with us.
That was great.
Appreciate it. Kevin, good, thanks.